For coming to my channel. I'm reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is the Barnes & Noble Classics edition. It has footnotes and endnotes that I may be referencing, various points while I read. I won't be reading the entire thing out loud. That's that's not really it's not really my thing. Plus, I get a scratchy throat pretty easily, so I never know how long I'll be reading for. We're up to chapter 16. The creature, Frankenstein's monster, has been telling Frankenstein all about what his life has been like in the time since he's been created. He says that he found this really nice family who lived in a shack, basically in the mountains, and he was quietly helping them without their being aware of who was helping them. And he thought that they were really nice people, and he eventually decides to introduce himself to them, but he's, well, he's horrifying looking and he knows it, and that's why he tries to go to the father first, because the father of the family is blind and seems to accept him at first, but then the two grown-up kids come back and see the monster there with their father and drive him away. The creature has been teaching himself a lot about morality and even taught himself how to read. He's pretty well read for a 1-year-old, but that's where we are. That's where we start here. He talks about how he's basically living in the woods now, like a wild animal, howling and destroying things all around him. Winter's coming on, so it's cold again. He wants to go on destroying things, but he quickly tires and settles into despair. Says, from that moment I declared everlasting war against the species, and more than all, against him who had formed me and sent me forth to this insupportable misery. In the morning he can hear voices in the woods, so he hides himself to think about what to do next. Starts he starts thinking about about the cottage and the family there, thinking that there might be another way for him to become friends with them. Tries to think of a plan. He hears the son, Felix, talking to apparently their landlord about how they need to leave because he believes the father's life is in danger. And he says he never saw the family anymore after that. Fell back into despair. And he felt at that point that the only link that he had with the world was broken. And for the first time, he wasn't trying to control the feelings of hatred and revenge, but he actually allows himself to start thinking about how deserted and angry he felt. That night, he actually sets off to the cottage. There's a note in here. Chapter 16. It says here that the burning tree branch is a callback to when Victor Frankenstein, saw a burning tree earlier. And whereas he was infatuated with the creative force of fire, the creature is determined to utilize its destructive capabilities. Now, that's a modern interpretation. We don't know if that's what Mary Shelley intended, but it is certainly an interesting dichotomy. As soon as he's fully convinced that it's burned beyond recovery, he heads back into the woods. He has no idea where to go except far, far away. Every place he can think of must be an equally bad choice for him. And eventually he starts thinking about Victor. Puts a lot of effort into finding him. Even though the only thing he feels towards Victor right now is hatred. He says, "You had endowed me with perceptions and passions, and then cast me abroad an object for the scorn and horror of mankind. But on you only had I any claim for pity and redress, and from you I determined to seek that justice which I vainly attempted to gain from any other being that wore the human form." Says he travels only at night. Winter keeps getting darker and colder, and rain and snow. Eventually, spring comes back around. It's easy to forget about how much time is passing during all of this. Victor, we've already gone through the events of his life during this time. He was sick mostly, a lot of people, I mean, I think I pointed this out before when I read through his chapters, but a lot of people um, tend to skip over the fact that Victor was actually physically ill for much of the first couple of years, I guess, of the creature's life. So it's not just that he ran away from him, it's that he was too sick to go looking for him. But now they've found each other again, and Creature is telling him about what he's been up to the last couple of years or so. Like I say, I'm having trouble keeping track of how long it's been. I may have to go back through it again. He says that he, at one point, traveling through the woods, he hears some voices and hides himself. And a young girl comes running towards the spot where he was concealed, laughing. She slips and falls into the river, and he rushes from his hiding place and saves her. She was unconscious, and he tries to help her. But then somebody sees him and of course thinks the worst. And pulls the girl away from him, heading back into the woods. The creature follows, hardly knowing why. But then the man pulls a gun on him and shoots. And the creature sinks to the ground while the man runs off. This was then the reward of my benevolence. I had saved a human being from destruction, and as a recompense I now writhed under the miserable pain of a wound which shattered the flesh and bone. The feelings of kindness and gentleness which I had entertained but a few moments before gave place to hellish rage and gnashing of teeth. Inflamed by pain, I vowed eternal hatred and vengeance to all mankind. But the agony of my wound overcame me. My pulses paused, and I fainted. For some weeks I led a miserable life in the woods, endeavoring to cure the wound which I had received. The ball had entered my shoulder, and I knew not whether it had remained there or passed through. At any rate, I had no means of extracting it. My sufferings were augmented also by the oppressive sense of the injustice and ingratitude of their infliction. My daily vows rose for revenge, a deep and deadly revenge such as would alone compensate for the outrages and anguish I had endured. Well, now you know the source of the scene from the movies where Frankenstein is playing with a little girl and she goes into the water. The circumstances and the order of events are different, of course, but there's that. After a while, his wound is healed, and finally reaches Geneva, where he knows Victor to be. And he finds a hiding place where he can stay to try and think of how to approach Victor. Says a young child comes near his hiding place, and he thinks to himself that the kid might be young enough to not be prejudiced, so he decides to try and grab him. But as soon as the boy sees him, he yells. Calls him an ogre. Tells him to let him go because his father is a Frankenstein and he will punish you. And the creature says, Frankenstein, you belong then to my enemy, to him towards whom I have sworn eternal revenge. You shall be my first victim. Well, that escalated quickly. The child still struggled, and loaded me with epithets which carried despair to my heart. I grasped his throat to silence him, and in a moment he lay dead at my feet. So it was the creature who killed Victor's brother. I gazed on my victim, and my heart swelled with exultation and hellish triumph. Clapping my hands, I exclaimed, I too can create desolation. My enemy is not invulnerable. This death will carry despair. And he talks about the circumstances that led him to frame someone else for the murder. He took the locket that he took from the little boy and plants it on Justine. For some days I haunted the spot where these scenes had taken place, sometimes wishing to see you, Victor, sometimes resolved to quit the world and its miseries forever. At length I wandered towards these mountains, and have ranged through their immense recesses consumed by a burning passion which you alone can gratify. We may not part until you have promised to comply with my requisition. I am alone and miserable. Man will not associate with me. But one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create. And that finally is the end of the creature's tale. Victor and we, indeed, are all caught up on it. In chapter 17, well, I think we'll get to chapter 17 next time. I think that's enough for right now. Now, I've talked a few times in these videos about what a Frankenstein story, what a mad scientist story really needs. That's a realization. One of the things it needs, at least, is a realization from the mad scientist that of their own guilt, their own responsibility. I think the creature has given Victor plenty to feel responsible about. But at the same time, the creature has also confessed to killing the boy and framing someone for his murder. So, whether Victor is going to feel any sympathy for that is, well, I guess we'll find out next time. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you more later.